I don't know, Scott. I don't know if pastors really know who's attending their church every week.
I don't think that they do.
No? All right. Let's talk about it now on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Mathieu. All right. I have a bone to pick with pastors.
Okay. Well, this is the place for it.
Yeah.
Let's air it out publicly.
That's right. Let's make everyone who listens to this podcast upset. No. Okay, so here's my theory, and it's the premise of today's episode of the podcast. My theory is that pastors like to say that only half of their church is there on any given Sunday.
Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard it from their lips to my ears more than once.
Yeah, only like half our folks are here, and so I want to do a little digging into like the root of where did this canard come from, and why do pastors say it? What's the truth? And what should you do about it? So that's the topic of today's podcast.
All right. Well, just another week for us solving all of the world's problems.
That's right.
So
that's exactly right. Right. Before we dive in though to this, should we do a little shout out for Healthy Churches Toolkit?
Of course, it's a good place to start the show. It's a good place to start in revitalization or optimization in your church.
Yeah, so go to healthychurchestoolkit.com. If you don't know what it is, the Healthy Churches Toolkit is an online resourcing platform from our team here at the Malphurs Group. It has all of our training around strategic envisioning, around leadership pipeline design, around developing a biblical board. We even have a simple 7-day starter type course called the Church Checkup Challenge, which will help you kind of think about where are the pockets of unhealth in your church. We have a vast resource library. We have ministry-centric AI tools. We have all kinds of features in there that are designed to save you time and to help you streamline your ministry. So all the pain points that you feel, very likely there's a tool inside that toolkit that can make your life better. So get 7 days free, malphursgroup.com/toolkit, or better yet, just go to healthychurchestoolkit.com. I always forget that now you can just do that. Healthychurchestoolkit.com, get 7 days free. Check it out. All right.
And let me tell our friends outside of North America also, you can go to healthychurchesglobal.com and register for the toolkit at no cost. Our generous supporters and a portion of the cost paid by North American churches helps make that available at no cost to you guys at healthychurchesglobal.com. So do that.
There you go.
Do that.
Cool. All right, very good. All right, so let's dive into this myth. Only half of your church shows up each week. I have a theory.
Percentage, some larger than 0%, is coming on alternate weeks or something to that effect. Yeah.
So I have a theory on where this comes from.
Okay.
All right. So my theory is that let me take a step back and go. I have done my research. I can officially say I have done the requisite research. There isn't a lot of good data, I should say, telling us of the people who regularly attend church, how often do those people go to church?
Yeah.
There's a lot of data on people who call themselves Christians and how often they go to church. There's a lot of data on how much the average person in the United States, say, goes to church. But of the people who actually do, not self-proclaimed regular attenders, but actual regular attenders, which is a different subset. I can call myself a regular attender, but am I really? I mean, of the people who actually regularly attend church, how often do they regularly attend church? There's not a lot. I'm not going to say it's zero. You'll find some information out there, but it's not a lot of information. So where I think this myth comes from is the large amount of data about how often Americans go to church or self-proclaimed Christians go to church. And you see those numbers, and those numbers come in something like only 20% of people who call themselves a Christian regularly goes to church every week. So I think what happens is pastors read that headline and they extrapolate that out to their church, and they go, oh, probably half the people at my church, it's different. It's a different set every week. Only half of the people who go to our church are there on any given Sunday. We got people who are there A weeks and people who are there B weeks. Like, it's a completely different set of people.
Yeah.
Have I made that clear? Like, have I said that in a way that makes any sense? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, on several occasions, I have had pastors just really from the jump, even just say that. Yeah, it's about half our church attends, a couple times. And and in their mind, it's actually really specific. Like, they actually think it's different people there, on the first and third weeks versus the second and fourth weeks. And, I usually gently kind of push like, oh, is that what you've tracked? That's what you've found? And it's more of a gut feeling. It's not hard.
So they'll say things like, well, on an average Sunday, we've probably got 120 people here, but, I'd say about maybe 100 more than that call our church home. We got maybe 200 or 220 people who call our church home. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's my theory, and maybe that's true. This is kind of not the point, but I guess the reason why this bothers me is I don't think you really know.
Yeah.
I think you're just saying that.
That's more of what we're talking about today. Do you know or do you not know? So we're going to break this down into a couple of different areas. Here, let me throw in a little bit of data here for you, Scott. I just pulled this up while we're talking.
Okay. All right.
Our church ministry analysis. We ask, how often do you attend?
Well, yeah. Okay.
And so this is like a best case scenario, because the people, when we work with a church and they go through the church ministry analysis, we tell them the appropriate audience to take the survey. And it's not random people in the church, that just show up every now and then. So this is leaders in the church.
These are engaged people in church. Yeah.
Known to be engaged in the church. So here's that data. This is probably a high watermark, actually. So we've had over 1,800 people take the church ministry analysis. I don't know if you knew that. It's a pretty high number.
I would have guessed it was close to that.
3.4% attend weekly out of that. 4.7% attend every other week.
Okay.
So that's a pretty strong. If you really are engaged in your church, you are there just about weekly. And then the once a month was less than 1%, and then the occasional group is down there around that area too. So among people,
to your point, we're not throwing the church ministry analysis out with the whole church.
That's right.
We're only sending it to people who we know already are involved. But still, right. I think this kind of proves my theory. And again, this is just a theory. I mean, what you just shared is real data, but it kind of supports my theory, which is that the less than weekly people, let's give everybody a 1 week a month buffer. Let's just say we're not calling someone who's out once a month a bad person, or they're for whatever, they're sick, a work thing, they're out of town.
You can have 3 of them a year. I'm going to allow 3 a year.
You're going to allow 3 a year? What about me? I'll sometimes go a whole month when I'm not at church because I'm gone.
We're in a church.
A church? Okay.
Because when we're not at our own church, we're at someone else's church.
At someone else's church. Okay, fair enough.
Bumping up their numbers.
Just don't count me. I don't count. I'm not in this. But imagine, basically you're there every week. But there's a handful of Sundays a year, maybe as much as 6 or 7 even that you're not there for whatever reason, vacation, illness, work obligation, something. Okay, kid thing, a kid is sick, something. All right. I think that my theory is that's like in an average church, probably 70, 65, like at least 2/3 of who's there on a Sunday morning could be identified that way.
Okay.
And the everything less than that, the people who are only there once a month, the people who regularly are gone twice a month, the people who only come on Easter and Christmas, that whole crowd makes up no more than 1/3 of the person who would call your church home.
Okay.
So at best, if you and I are talking and you say, yeah, 100 people are at our church on any given Sunday, but, I would say about 130 or 140 people call our church home. I would grant you that. I'd give you a buffer of like 30, 35 people. Is that fair?
Maybe. I don't know if I'd be that generous. I think,
really?
Yeah.
You think it's even smaller? You think that the occasionals or like once a month or type folks, that's an even smaller percentage?
Maybe so. I don't know.
Like 10% or 15%? What do you think?
Yeah, 66% sounds too close to 50%. If we're myth busting the 50%.
Okay.
That's
you're like,
slightly better
what's
than
16% among friends, between friends? Yeah.
I wonder if it'd be more like 20%.
Okay. Yeah, you might be right. I'm trying to be generous here. But it's definitely not half. It's not half.
Like, no,
can't be half.
I don't think it's half.
Can't be half. So,
well, here's my thing. If it was half, we ask churches for data, attendance data. Most, not all, but most have some okay data on that. To me, it's too clean. If half the people, because there's no way it has actually worked out that, half are coming this week, half are coming, 2 weeks has half this half, 2 weeks the other half. And so our attendance is always about the same,
yeah,
only minor variations week to week on attendance. I feel like if people were that random, if kids were sick that frequently or trips happen and all that, I feel like we would see everybody would end up there every now and then, and not Easter, not Christmas Eve. We would have these spikes.
Spikes and dips do happen, but they're usually pretty predictable. They're around bad weather or, Christmas is over, people are kind of settling back into the groove. So by the time you get to the second or third week in January, everyone's like, we really ought to show up at church now. Like life's normalized back. Beginning of the school year, everyone's going to start out on a new leaf. So you see these little bits of bumps. You do see that, but that doesn't make it twice. You'd go, well, if that's the case, then it should be double. But it's not that. I'd say it's at best it's a 30% bump over the baseline.
I think the numbers that you might be seeing are real. I think if you think you're doing better than what you're actually counting, I think that's a mythical gut feeling that you have. I think it is what it is. Almost like, the 2 years after COVID where people are still like, our attendance is down, but it was COVID. And now we're 5 years past COVID. You don't get to say that anymore. Your church is what it is today,
Yeah, that's true. We have an upcoming episode that you haven't heard yet, and we talk a little bit about data and denominators. And there is some value in knowing, like, what is that overall number of people who are connected to your church, because you can use that data in a different way. But I do think for a lot of other things, that denominator of average worship attendance is still helpful as a metric, because it does kind of characterize what your church is. And I think this is maybe the point. Actually, we're kind of circling around what you and I both kind of agreed is the point is, it doesn't really matter what the data would even say at the macro level. Even if we were to know, okay, the rule of thumb is 70% or 66% or 50% or 20% of your folks are there once a month, and the rest are there, at least three times a month. It doesn't matter, because that's a generality. What matters is your church. What about your church? What percentage of your church is there once a month? It doesn't matter except for a conversation like you and I have been having for 10 minutes about, like, I don't know, what do you think it is? I don't know, what do you beyond that, it's irrelevant. If you are a pastor of a church, you should know what the number is at your church.
Yeah. It's like Jesus with the apostle. But what about you? Who do you say I am? Now we're going to get into it.
Yeah, that's right. So how bad? That's why we titled this, "How Big is Your Church Actually?" So let's talk about why that matters. I think there are a couple of things that stand out to me, and I'll just hit those, and then you can say what you're thinking, AJ. First one is, I think you need to identify two key groups of people, or maybe three. The first would be, who are the people who really are on the margins? Like those people who really do, they only come once a month. Not the percentage, the names. Give me the names. Who are these people? The second group of people who would be good to identify are those people who you probably think are in that category, but they actually are there every week. But the reason why you think they're in that category is because they don't ever move beyond Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So in your head, you're like, this is a person who's not very connected. What do you mean? They're there 3 out of every 4 Sundays. They are there, but they've never taken a step beyond Sunday morning. And so you think of them as a flaky person, but they're there every week. Who are those people? Those people who they're engaged in your church, but they are not stepping beyond Sunday. Like that might be the most important group to be able to know.
Yeah.
And then there's the group that you probably, they're the ones that come to your mind already. They're the ones who are volunteering everywhere. They come to everything. You know that they're there every week. You probably know who these people are already. So you kind of have these 3 categories. People who really are on the fringe. And that's beyond the folks who are visitors and guests. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who are connected to your church on a regular basis. Who's on the fringes, who's there, but not moving past Sunday. And then you know the people. And I guess I would just contend that most churches have nothing more than a gut sense about who these groups of people are. They've not done any real work to actually get real numbers. And you might actually be kind of disappointed, or maybe you would be positively surprised at how many people or what the percentage is that's really engaged and how often they're there.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, to me, this all comes down to intentionality. How intentional are we, or do we want to be in discipling people? Because you have to have this data, to really know how are we doing? I guess you don't need to know. You don't need to have the data to structure your church in a way that makes sure nobody gets left behind. But you do have to have the data to know, where are we starting from, and are we making improvements in that? So, this is what we drive home with, constantly in our work, is being intentional. Everything the church does should be intentional towards what? Well, fulfilling the Great Commission. Are we helping to make disciples? Are we helping to mature people in the faith to become disciple makers? And the way that happens is by having structure, having information, having strategies, having vision, communicating well, and all these things play in to this piece of information right here. Because if we don't know what's going on, we cannot better do what we are called to do, to disciple people. So that's why it matters. And why it shouldn't be overlooked, and we shouldn't be just going on gut feeling, but good information. Good information leads to good decision making.
Yeah, and I guess I would just we've talked about this before, and it's an analogy I think is really helpful. But we are called. If you're a pastor, you are called to shepherd the flock. To be an under shepherd under Jesus, to shepherd and to feed the sheep, right? But you feed individual sheep. You don't just feed an abstract group of sheep. And the parable that Jesus uses about with the lost sheep, when he leaves the 99 and goes after the one, again, I know we've talked about this before on the podcast, but the framing of that parable is, what shepherd having 100 sheep, losing one, would not leave the 99 and go get the one? It isn't a crazy love. It isn't like, whoa, what audacious, what an insane thing for this shepherd to do. It's framed as a completely normal and expected thing for the shepherd to do. That this is what a shepherd would do. A shepherd would leave the 99 and go and get the one. And my contention is that there are a lot of us who are in ministry who we don't even know. We don't know who the 100 are, so we don't know who the one is.
Right.
That we should be chasing. And so that's why maybe this is why it irritates me when I hear pastors go, it's probably like 300 people who call our church home. Well, how many is it exactly? Because if you're a shepherd, how many sheep are under your care? Who has God called you to shepherd? And
there you go.
holding you accountable to knowing it's not maybe realistic or even possible because we're not the Lord to know every name, but to be so flippant about it and be like, I don't know, there's probably like some group of people, I have no idea who they are. Like that's what bothers me. It's like, we should know. This is why data matters.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Maybe you wouldn't know if one wasn't there. What would the number be though? 20? Would you notice if 20 weren't there? Would you know if 33 weren't there? Depending.
And this is, to me, I guess there are going to be some people listening to this, AJ, who would go, well, that's why churches shouldn't be big. To me, it's not a big church, small church thing, because I've seen small churches do a bad job with this too. It's obviously easier in a smaller church to notice than in a larger church, but sometimes larger churches are better at data, and data is good. So it's not an either or thing. We can be good at shepherding at any size, or bad at shepherding at any size. Yeah,
for sure. All right, well let's talk about what can we do, Scott? How can we know better where we're starting from? Because it's not necessarily a super easy solution, because you actually get into, well, how does our church function? What size are we now? How does it function? What ministries do we offer? Because there are some real barriers to having good data about who is really attending. And so some of the easy ways to know, a count is great, but that doesn't tell you who, just tells you how many. So Sunday school small groups ministry is one way to know, because it's in that small environment. It's not a big deal to have more of an attendance taken. Children's ministry is a good way to know. When parents check in kids, we're like, okay, well, they're here, unless the parents run out the door, they drop the kids off and go to Starbucks.
I guess that happens. Not super common.
That's a couple of ways to maybe pull data from other places that we can bring into the data set to know a little bit better. Sometimes it's not quite easy.
Yeah. So I'm hearing the complaints. People go, well, what's your solution then, bro? And I think you've mentioned two good ones. I mean, like, if you were to at least start by taking good attendance at your community life things, and then correlating children's ministry check-in data. But if you were to go, no, we want to take this seriously, and you wanted to go a step beyond and really start tracking, there would be a couple of things you could do. And I'm not suggesting these things are easy, but you could do them. One would be, and I attended a large church when I was in college. My parents lived in Wisconsin at that time. And when I was home from college, I attended this church with them. They had, no joke, every week they printed off, this was like 1,000 people, maybe 1,200 people. It's a lot.
Crazy.
They printed off name tags, like Avery labels, for every person that was on the roster. And then you were to peel that off each week and put it on, and wear it. And then that's how they knew who was there and who was not there, by what name tags got pulled. Another way to do this, you can do check-in through Planning Center and have an Avery label printer, just like you do for children's ministry. You can do that. You and I know of a church that does this, an international church that does this. They're a church of a couple hundred people, so they're not, it's not a church of 50, and they're doing this every week. People come in, and that's how they are able to identify who a guest is too, because they don't have one, and so they handwrite them, and then they put them in the system so that the next week when they come back, they can print their own name tag. So that costs money. That costs something.
Some people might hear that and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible! I can't believe anybody would want to do that." Part of me is like, it would be nice to know people's names. Yeah, I wouldn't hate it. Maybe a reward system, a regular attender, that way. Yeah.
Yeah, get a free premium coffee beverage.
Gamify it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another way to do this that would be, it's more creepy, but it's less work. One of our colleagues owns a business, and I'm not, at least at the time of this recording, we don't have an affiliate agreement. Maybe someday we would, but he has a product called Wi-Fi Presence, and it connects in with your church's Wi-Fi. And so that just like when you go to McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, you accept a certain type of agreement when you log into the Wi-Fi for the first time. Once it does that, it's pretty simple technology behind it. It's IP address tracking. So anytime someone shows up, when a person shows up to your church and they log into your Wi-Fi, it associates that IP address with your database and it takes attendance for that person. So you would know not only that they came, but how often they came. And so that's totally passive. It's nice for the user in the sense that they don't have to print a name tag or wear a name tag or whatever. But I mean, I recognize that might not play in every culture. Some people might find that to be sort of a big brother, creepy type situation.
We're just a stone's throw away from facial recognition technology,
yeah, sure.
Going more mainstream. The camera over the sanctuary door would be checking off every face. That seems maybe a little extreme to me.
Could be creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there are other ways to do this. You can be as manual with this data collection as you want to be, and you can be as specific as you want to be. I'm just encouraging you to be more specific and make fewer assumptions. The more that you actually know, and the less that you're just guessing, the better. Right?
That's basically what we wanted to accomplish in today's episode, was learn a little bit more, get into seek a greater level of information, and then work through that with your team. Talk about what we really have, because what we would like to see is that it just leads you to make some strategic choices. How can we better disciple people? And keep people engaged, get them engaged, keep them engaged, and build them up in the faith. But let's seek that output from the ministries of the church for the purpose of unity in the church. I mean, build up the believers.
Yeah, those people who are on the margins. How can we minister to those people? Those people who are here regularly, but they're not moving past Sunday morning. Why? Like, we should talk to them maybe and disciple them differently rather than lump them into the same group as the people who are only there once a month, because it's a different kind of behavior. If someone's committed enough to show up more often than not, but they're not going beyond that, you should be curious as to why that is. Are we not communicating well with them? Are we not holding them accountable? Are we not telling them how we would want them to be engaged? Are we not communicating the value of it? Why would you want to? Mm-hmm. All of those things. I don't know. I mean, but my experience has been that most churches know who their really committed people are, and then kind of assume that everybody else is flaky. And I think that there's probably more grades of nuance in there than most pastors are giving credit.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, we mentioned the Healthy Churches Toolkit at the top of the show, so definitely go to healthychurchestoolkit.com and check that out. There's a 7-day free trial, and there's resources in there that can help you communicate with your church better, and some things that can help you structure your environment to be more of a disciple-making center. So there you go. Thanks for being with us on this episode of the Church Revitalization Podcast. There's links below in the description on YouTube or on your podcast app that can get you into this week's article, where there's all kinds of links. There's all kinds of good stuff over there that we produce every week that hopefully can help your church thrive, because that's what we're all about. Thanks for being with us, everybody.